cobras, taipans, sea snakes, mambas. In an evolutionary sense, much of the animal kingdom has been at war with them for a very long time. They're all part of a family of snakes called elapids that evolved around 37 million years ago and spread around the globe. And as they did, they brought with them some adaptations that suddenly made the world a much more dangerous place for the rest of us. Specifically, a type of venom that targets an ancient Achilles heel found in the nervous systems of basically all vertebrates. Faced with these snakes, species all over their vertebrate family tree found themselves locked in a desperate evolutionary arms race to cope. For some, the rise and spread of venomous elapids was just another challenge to adapt to. For others, it was a catastrophe of almost apocalyptic proportions. And we humans are no exception. Because it seems that when elapids slithered onto the ecological scene, not even our ancestors were safe. Despite having so many well-known species, the family Elapidae is only a relatively recent addition to the snakes. While snakes as a whole have been around for well over 100 million years, molecular analyses date the earliest elapids to around 37 million years ago, with the oldest fossils dating to just 25 million years ago. But once they arrived on the scene, elapids diversified at some of the highest rates ever seen among reptiles and rapidly spread across the world. Of the 600 or so species of venomous snakes that exist, about half of them are elapids, including many of the most deadly species. From coral snakes in the Americas to black mambas in Africa, to king cobras in Asia, to like a dozen different kinds of snakes in Australia, because obviously Australia. And a big part of their success probably came down to the sophistication of their weapons. See, elapids didn't invent venom. That's an ancient trait in snakes that may have even been present in their four-legged lizard ancestors. But they did turn venom into an art form. Many other snakes have solid fangs at the back of their mouths that can deliver only small amounts of venom at low pressure. Elapids, on the other hand, no. They have hollow syringe-like fangs at the front of their mouths that can deliver much more venom at high pressure. And while some of the other families of snakes with front fangs, like vipers, usually have relatively slow-acting venom that ravages the victim's cells and tissues, the venom of elapids is generally much more insidious. It's mostly neurotoxic, causing rapid paralysis and death by interfering with the body's ability to communicate with itself. The venom's neurotoxins do this by binding to specific nervous system receptors that are deeply rooted in vertebrate evolution. These receptors are shared by species across the family tree, like a molecular Achilles heel. When the neurotoxins bind to these receptors, they can no longer send nerve signals around the body. Suddenly, this disrupts basic functions like movement and breathing, and death can occur in hours or even minutes. Armed with this especially deadly combination of traits, the rise of elapids triggered the unfolding of an evolutionary arms race. One that occurred in parallel around the world, as different vertebrate groups that were unlucky enough to run into elapids suddenly had to find a way to cope. And in 2023, researchers found perhaps the strongest signal of this ancient struggle in one especially hard-hit group, Sicilians. And despite the fact that my name ends in a vowel, I'm not talking about the kind that talks with their hands, like my dad's side of the family. I'm talking about the way it's spelled this way. This order of legless amphibians may look snake-like, but they're actually a much older group than snakes, so it's more accurate to say that snakes are Sicilian-like. Either way, despite the fact that these two groups have some superficial similarities, the researchers' analysis showed that they are definitely not on good evolutionary terms. Because by analyzing the nervous system receptors of Sicilian lineages from around the world, the researchers found something incredible. Around the time that elapids began to diversify and spread, different Sicilian lineages convergently evolved resistance to their neurotoxic venom at least 15 times. This happened in parallel all over the planet, from ancient Sicilian populations in the Americas to those in Africa to those in Asia. But they didn't all converge on the same kind of resistance. Some lineages have a mutation that basically block the toxins from reaching the receptors at all. Others changed the physical shape of the receptors, which made the toxin no longer fit, like trying to open a lock with the wrong key. A third set of lineages switched the electromagnetic charge of their receptors, essentially repelling the toxin. Fiendishly clever. And 8 species had more than one of these mechanisms. The scale of this evolutionary resistance to venom was completely unprecedented. The selection pressure that Sicilians faced must have been pretty extreme for them to have convergently evolved resistance so many times, in so many places, and in multiple different ways. They were probably succumbing to elapid venom left, right, and center in an absolute Sicilian apocalypse of sorts. And it's easy to see why. Their worm-like anatomy would likely have made them especially vulnerable, as with their ecological niche of burrowing, as elapids are the major snake predators in this niche. The global carnage must have been so intense that individuals with random mutations in their receptors that decreased the effects of venom were consistently favored by natural selection. These lucky survivors repopulated the world after the elapids devastated Sicilian populations. And their modern descendants have receptors molded by this ancient struggle that is still playing out across the world. Apart from one specific corner of the globe, that is, the Seychelles. These islands separated from India around 65 million years ago, tens of millions of years before the first elapids evolved. And to this very day, no elapids have ever set foot there, or belly. So the lucky Sicilians there have never encountered elapids and their venom in their entire evolutionary history. And sure enough, the researchers found that the Sicilians of the Seychelles are the only ones whose receptors show no signs of having adapted against neurotoxic venoms. They just completely sat out the arms race, if you can call it that when no one involved has, literal arms. Now, while Sicilians showed the most extreme signal of this arms race with elapids found so far, they were not alone. Their particular battle was just part of a broader evolutionary war that many other vertebrate groups have also been fighting. While no other group has been found to have convergently evolved resistance on so many independent occasions, similar mutations have been found in the receptors of animals like meerkats, mongooses, and, of course, honey badgers. Honey badgers don't care. And in another recent paper, researchers stumbled upon something pretty unexpected. It turns out that we too have some anti-elapid tricks up our evolutionary sleeves. By studying the same nervous system receptors in various primates and testing their susceptibility to neurotoxic venoms, scientists were able to identify some resistance adaptations. And they found that resistance to elapid venom was strongest in the last common ancestor of chimpanzees, gorillas, and humans, giving these species a greater ability to resist neurotoxic venom than any other primate group. This suggests that, of all the primate lineages they looked at, it was ours that had been most vulnerable to elapids. Probably cobras, specifically, which are abundant in the same areas that we evolved in, are active in the daytime like our ancestors were, and readily bite bigger animals when threatened. So it's easy to imagine how this evolutionary battle may have played out. As our ancestors began spending less time in the trees and more time on the ground, they would have come into contact with neurotoxic snakes like cobras much more often. And this selection pressure favored individuals with receptors that helped them survive these encounters, and later gifted us with at least partial resistance. Now, to be absolutely clear, this does not mean that you're immune to the venom of cobras and other elapids. This is not permission for you to go out playing with them, okay? They look like friends, but they are not your friends. You should still treat them with the caution and respect they deserve. It just means that we're better able to cope with neurotoxic venom than other primate groups that have had less exposure to this danger. Like, for example, the lemurs of Madagascar, who have never coexisted with elapids and show no signs of any mutations in their receptors that confer resistance, exactly like the Sicilians in the Seychelles. And weirdly enough, our arms race with cobras may also have driven them in a new evolutionary direction too. Some researchers have proposed that by learning to poke them with long sticks and throw stuff at them from a distance, we hominins may have inadvertently caused some cobra lineages to evolve ranged weapons, becoming spitting cobras. That's on us. So yes, we might be responsible for the evolution of spitting cobras, a hypothesis we explored in another episode. While there's still a lot to learn about the ancient global arms race that the rise of the elapids triggered, what we figured out so far shows us just how interconnected all living things are. A single group can cause an evolutionary shock to reverberate across the tree of life, impacting species from legless amphibians to great apes, changing them down to the molecular level forever. And the more we explore the spread of this successful group of snakes, the more we see that our evolutionary journeys are a complex and tangled history.
Hey Eons fans, it's me, Hank. Did you know that the team that makes this show also makes another show about the strange creatures that inhabit this grand Earth? Except this time, all of the creatures are very much still alive, and we have video of them to prove it. Join me and Sarah Suda as we introduce you to these bizarre beasts and explore what makes these animals so weird to us. From echolocating birds to millipedes that stop to train, the show examines the how and why of some of the world's most amazingly strange critters. If that doesn't get you subscribed, I don't know what will. Check out Bizarre Beasts at the link in the description.
So snakes are probably one of the most famous venomous animals, but did you know that venom is also found on the mammal side of the family tree? Check out our episode, Our Bizarre, Possibly Venomous Relative, to learn more. Thanks to this month's sophisticated eontologists:
Jake Hart, Raphael Hassa, Annie and Eric Higgins, John Davison Ng, Melanie Lamb Carnevale, Addie, Tony Dye, and Juan M.
By becoming an Eonite at patreon.com/eons, you can get fun perks, like submitting a trivia question for me to read. Here's one from A. Lorelei V. Bees, vespid wasps, and ants are all eusocial insects in the same order. Did eusociality evolve just once in a common ancestor, or independently in all three groups? That seems like something convergent. I think eusociality seems like a... We might have even... I've done enough episodes on ants for that to summon up a memory of that, but also it seems like a trait that was like a... Put your guesses in the comments and stick around after the blooper to get the answer. And as always, thank you for joining me in the Adam Lowe studio. Subscribe at youtube.com/eons for more meanderings in the Mesozoic. It's mostly neurotoxic. I saw that word and I'm like, why are you calling me out like that? Neurotoxic I feel like that's me. And I just invented a new toxic trait. I'm like neurotoxic. Neurospicy and toxic at the same time. I'm gonna add that to my Hinge profile. Neurotoxic, just so you know. The answer to the trivia question is, wait for it, independently in all three groups. Let's go. Did you get it right? I did.